If you had told me in 2020 that 5 years later I would be using this as the computer that runs my home studio, I would have had some words to say to you. Primarily, why would I buy an Apple Mac? I've been a PC and a Windows user for 30 years. What possibly could have convinced me to change from a PC to a Mac? Well, you know what it was? It was Apple Silicon, because 2020 at WWDC was when Apple first announced the new M1 Mac, a system on a chip. And it created some change. In fact, you could say it changed everything when it comes to Apple, not only for Macs, but for iPads, and who knows, maybe into iPhones and other devices into the future. Hi, my name's Pete Johns. I am a Mac user, but I have only been a Mac user for 5 years. And today I'm going to share not only my story, but the history of Apple Silicon. Because believe it or not, this is not unprecedented by any stretch. This is not the first time that Apple have changed everything and have switched from one type of chip manufacturer to another. In fact, they've done it multiple times, which we'll talk about as we go through the show. My personal experience with this, 2020 rolls around, WWDC. I'm tuned in trying to find out what's new with Apple because, hey, this channel's all about Apple, right? This channel's all about creating and recording and releasing music using your iPhone and your iPad, using GarageBand and more recently Logic Pro for iPad. But it really didn't have much of a Mac flair. In fact, whenever anyone asked me about a Mac, I would happily handball them over to our mate Patrick over at the GarageBand Guide because he did cover more of the Mac stuff. But when this WWDC came around, it was different. There was something new, and it was the M1 chip. It was Apple Silicon system on a chip. Now, my first reaction to this was, no thanks. Why? Because I came from a world where computers are components. Computers are a chip and RAM and a graphics processor, and everything is independent and individual. Why? For upgradability, of course, you want to be able to swap out some newer, faster, bigger size RAM, a new hard drive, a new graphics card. You don't want to be stuck with what you first buy. So when I saw that this was basically taking the approach that everything's on one chip, you can't upgrade your RAM because it's on the chip, you can't upgrade your storage because it's on the chip, I thought that's not going to be for me. And then I started seeing some people talking about it. And then I started seeing reviews for the M1. And I started seeing exactly how it could perform. And here's the thing, here's the real reason. The finger thing means the money. It always means the money. Apple Macs were historically way too expensive. When I compared building a new PC to buying a Mac, it was a no-brainer. To get the performance of a PC and a Mac, you were paying 2 to 3 times as much. Now, Mac people would say, yes, but you're getting the convenience, you're getting the system, you're getting the architecture, etc. Sure, but for me as a PC user, it wasn't attractive. However, when Apple launched the Mac Mini M1 and I started seeing folks using it in their home studios for live streaming, for video, for audio, for everything, and it was performing on par with, if not better, than high-end PCs, yeah, I was interested. Of course I was, because as a GarageBand user, a Logic Pro curious at that point, I thought, hey, this could mean that I can expand out and start looking at those sort of things. And it could mean that everything would be integrated. The other thing that happened at the same time is the software side of it. So along with Apple Silicon, with the hardware, they also changed the software. And as we've seen recently with the new iPad OS 26 and Mac OS 26 and iOS 26 announcements, yeah, they're all closer to each other than ever, which some people won't love. But for me, whenever I walked into an Apple store and started playing around with a Mac, I didn't get it. I just didn't understand it. I didn't know how to open and close windows. Everything just seemed foreign. What's this traffic light thing doing here? Everything seemed foreign. So the more familiar it was, the more it looked like iOS, the easier it was for me. So my first Mac experience. Now, was my first Mac experience all roses? Did everything work perfectly out of the box? Was there no learning curve at all? No. You know how Apple say it just works? Well, let's just say that my Apple experience wasn't exactly like that. It didn't all just work. What were the problems? There was problems with the Bluetooth mouse for some reason. It kept cutting out. I had all sorts of problems with my screen and resolution and keeping the two monitors that I wanted to use connected to the Mac. The webcam. There was no native way to control the webcam. I had to buy, which I still use to this day, an app called Webcam Settings to adjust the settings on my webcam. And let's not get me started on the windowing system. Like, why when I close a window, does the window not close? Why do I have to quit things? What's my Control-Alt-Delete? Where's my task manager? Why won't it show my hard drive when I open the Finder? I just want to see my hard drive. So yeah, it wasn't a smooth transition. Am I glad that I did it now? Am I much happier now? Do I love the integration of being able to airdrop between my devices and having everything all in one platform? Yes. But was it a smooth way to go? No. And do I begrudge anyone? You know what we say around here? Use what works for you. You do you, boo. If you're a PC user and you would never use a Mac, and you'll get into my comment section right now saying, I can't believe you moved from PC to Mac. PC's far superior. That's great. If it works for you, that's wonderful. So I say all that to say it's been a bit of a time. There's been a lot going on, hasn't there? So why don't we go in to a little history lesson. Sorry, I spare no expense with the effects in the show. 1994 was the first major transition Apple were using in the earliest Macs, the Motorola 68000 series chips. And big announcement happened. Apple get up there and they say, we're moving to PowerPC. We're moving to this new type of chip, and it's going to be faster, and it's going to be better, and it's going to be wonderful. And for the next decade, it kind of was. It worked all right. It was fine. Then we get to 2006, and this is the one that many of you may remember, where Apple come out and say, the PowerPC is fine, but if we really want to compete with Microsoft Windows and with the PC clones that were gaining all of the market share, we've got to move to Intel, don't we? So they moved to the x86 Intel chips, and for the next decade and a half, things were ticking along. Yeah, look, Apples were competitive, but they didn't have the control over them. When Intel promised them a chip by a certain date and then didn't deliver on it, then they were stuck. So what did Apple do? Did they just keep sucking it up and dealing, or did they do something else? Well, they did something else. They started developing their own silicon. So when we say silicon, by the way, it's just a fancy way of saying they make the chips, they make the hardware, they make the guts, the bits that go inside your computer. And as I mentioned at the start, traditionally, you'd have a CPU, a GPU, your hard drive, everything, your RAM chips, everything would be separate. What Apple did is said, if we can own it all, we can put it all on the one chip. And we can just create this M1 chip that has everything you need. It has CPU, it has GPU, it has the memory. It means that there's no gateways, there's no roadblocks between the CPU, the central processor, and the graphics processor. It means that the memory can be shared and available for all of those different applications, and whether it's graphical or the actual grunt of the processing. And it was kind of genius. It was a move that meant that they could produce at a lower cost and therefore reduce the prices of a lot of the Macs that they were selling. And they could also produce more efficiently and own the end-to-end process. So the thermal efficiency, the battery life for your laptops and things, having complete control over the platform. And what made it really shift was that they were able to move their laptops and desktops and tablets and everything all in-house. And they'd already seen the success of doing this with the iPhone and the iPad with the A series chips. So why not? Why not do the same with the Mac? And that's exactly what they did. So from 2020 till now, what happened? It's moved pretty fast, and it hasn't really been a one per year, but we started in 2020. We had the M1, we had the MacBook Air, the MacBook Pro, and the Mac Mini. So they all launched in 2020, and yes, I picked up my first at the end of 2020. Into 2021, we had the iMac, we had the iPad Pro. So there was something that was a bit different. The iPad Pro was suddenly rocking the M1 chip, and this was like, okay. So now we've got the exact same chip in our iPad Pro as we have in our Mac. This is interesting. Does this mean Mac OS is coming to iPad? Still no, but we've seen some changes. We had the M1 Pro and the M1 Max. So in 2021, they took it a next step. They're like, you know how the M1's great? Well, what if you wanted like double that or quadruple that? Well, we can do that because we've got the Max and the Pro. 2022, the Ultra. Yes, the MacBook Pro with the M1 Max and M1 Ultra. And guess what started then as well? The Mac Studio. So the Mac Mini was released, and then the Mac Studio was like a big extruded with a big forehead Mac Mini, which at the time I thought looked ridiculous, and then I bought one. It's kind of the way these things go. We moved through M2 with the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro. 2023, M2 Pro, M2 Max, M2 Ultra, and we had the new Mac Studio and the new Mac Pro. Yes, the Mac Pro finally got an update. It hasn't since 23, so it's been another 2 years without an update, but we did get an update to the Mac Pro. 2024 was interesting, wasn't it? We had the M3, but only on the iMac and only on the MacBook Air. It never made it anywhere else. Why? We'll talk about that in a moment. Because the very first device that got the M4 was the iPad. Yeah, I know, I was surprised too. So Apple launched the M4, and the first device, the first computer that had the M4 was the iPad Pro. Yeah, and I used one, and I still have one right now, and it is fabulous because it's absolute overkill for what you need to do on an iPad generally. And then we finally, in 2024 and into 25, the MacBook Pro, the iMac, the Mac Mini, the new little tacker, the tiny Mac Mini, the little app, the little hockey puck one, and the MacBook Air, all having the M4. Now, my journey through all this is that I bought the M1 Mac. Apple lent me an M1 Max MacBook Pro, which was fabulous. Eventually, I had to give that one back. And after using the M1 and struggling with the lack of storage and RAM, because I only went for the base model, I finally got myself a Mac Studio, which is using the M2 Max chip in there. And look, could I have waited until the M4 was on the Mac Studio? Yeah, but here's the problem. It's always a waiting game, and I needed a new computer. So I decided to get that. And most recently, I have got an M4 device. I got the M4 Pro on the MacBook Pro 14-inch, which is my kind of daily driver laptop now. So I am all in on Apple Silicon. I have 3 devices that all use the Apple M series silicon, and they all work really well. They are great. What was so good about all this? Well, the M1, it ran so efficiently that a lot of the devices either have no fans or they use very little fan power to cool, which is pretty amazing. They're instantly on. So none of this whole booting up stuff that we're used to with PCs. It was like, tap it, boom, you're away. And the rollout was quite genius because it's almost a thing per year. Hasn't quite been. It would have been nice if M5 was 2025. Like, they're kind of a year behind now. So I don't know. Will they jump straight to M6 next year? Like, or M26? Is everything just going to be called 26 now? Very, very strange. And yeah, just the consistency in the naming is actually pretty important. And look, I say consistency, but there is a problem with that. So yes, in a bubble, M1, M2, M3, M4, M4 better than M3, better than M2, better than M1. But here's the problem. The Pro, the Max, and the Ultra meant you had situations where an M1 Ultra was better than an M2, and an M3 Pro was better than an M4. So you did really have to sort of look at the specs, because you had to realize that, yeah, a Mac Pro running an M2 Ultra is a heck of a lot quicker than a MacBook Air running an M4. So it still has that problem, but at least you know that you kind of got the latest. If you've got an M4, you got the latest, don't you? Let's talk about the performance and the power efficiency and how all the stuff, the reasons that they did this. So unified memory, the system on a chip design of the integrated neural engine and graphics processor unit. This not only, as I said before, reduced cost, but was surprisingly good. For the folks that came out straight away and said, there is no way that it integrated... We all remember the days of the Intel integrated graphics. If you're a PC user, you had a laptop or a desktop that had those integrated graphics, and they were just awful, because the way that the processor and the graphics shared the memory and shared the processing, it was just rubbish. However, the way that the Mac architecture, because everything's on that chip, again, the bottlenecks aren't there, and it works really well. The performance per watt compared to Intel, and we'll talk about Intel. Poor Intel were really struggling at this point because they were already kind of behind the curve, and then they weren't able to keep up and deliver anything like this. And when Apple came out and started talking about the energy efficiency and the performance per watt, it was like chalk and cheese, night and day. It was nuts. The fanless designs and the huge battery life on like those, even the M1 MacBook Airs. We're talking like 18, 20 a day of battery life, and not like the old claims where you used to get a computer and it's like, oh, it has up to 8 hours battery life, and you got to use it 2 hours, and if you're doing anything slightly taxing, your battery's at like 10%. It wasn't like that at all. Yeah, and then just the AI acceleration. So the M4 focus was all about the neural processors. And when the big AI boom hit like a year or two ago, Apple were talking about sort of machine learning and neural processing. And now it's like M4 is the AI chip. And it kind of is, because a lot of folks that are processing things are using Mac and they're using M4. Let's talk about how these were actually received and what competitors were doing and have done since to kind of keep up. Well, the tech media were near universal in their praise for M1 and for Apple Silicon, calling it a revolution. Like there were lots of this sort of talk, as the evolution was before, and this is the revolution. This is taking something and just completely blowing it up and then rebuilding it as something completely different. So it was phenomenal. And again, I got caught up in the hype because the first device I bought was $1,000 Australian, which was $699 US for a Mac that had better performance than Macs that cost $3,000 or $4,000 in the last versions, and that were way better than the current crop of PCs that I could have been using in terms of what they needed to do. And I think that's really why everyone was so excited, because this wasn't just a bunch of specs on a page. Yeah, it was that too. But when you actually went to use it, everything just worked, apart from the things I talked about in the first segment. But once you ironed out the bugs and got used to the system, it flew along, running GarageBand, running Logic Pro. People did those tests where they put like 500 plugins on things, and it all works beautifully as well. User migration. So yeah, creative pros and average users alike were actually moving onto a Mac, which again, for someone like me, is something I just never thought I'd do. Because Intel were doing things at the time with their shade throwing. PC does what Mac can't. Yeah, how's that looking now for you, Intel? Yeah, let's look at Intel's stock price and Apple's stock price and see whether people agreed that Mac can't. Microsoft's slow ARM rollout, so their Surface Pros versus the M Series Max, they really kind of just dropped the ball there. They went from leading in terms of like the sleek, slick portable stuff to now, I don't know, like maybe your mileage may vary if you use a Surface Pro and you love it, great. But when you compare an iPad M4 with a Magic Keyboard to a Surface Pro, yeah, it's kind of night and day. Like not Mac, Microsoft stuck with like the pen input and running Windows and the ARM processors. Yeah, and then you look at M1, you look at the Silicon, and then more recently, Snapdragon X Elite trying to match Apple's lead. So weirdly, we've seen a lot of things come out. So we've seen people like Nvidia and like Snapdragon processors really start to push, because they're saying, hey, if we don't need to worry about the Intel of the world, because they're just so far behind. We need to keep up with Apple. We need to keep up with this silicon stuff. So it is really pushed. It has actually increased the level of competition, which is usually a good thing. So where to from here? With this sort of lead that Apple have now, is it just going to be rinse and repeat with M5 and M6 and M7 and just keep going? Is processing going to continue to get more efficient, to be lower energy use, to be cheaper, more cost effective? It's kind of the only, if you look around you, think of the products that you buy right now and then look at the price tag on Apple gear. And yes, there's unexpected and unpredictable things happening in the future around the likes of tariffs. But for now, Apple stuff is the same price, but it's arguably 3, 4, 5x what you got for your dollars. So it really is just going from strength to strength at the moment for Apple. The big question mark could be the AI, But again, if Apple do what they did at WWDC this year and realize that they don't have to reinvent things, they don't have to own the AI platforms, the large language models, and the actual algorithms, but if they own the hardware, if it's proven, which is kind of the case right now, that the best chips to be running this stuff on are Apple Silicon, then they're going to have a really decent lead, aren't they? If you need to run stuff, if you need some computation, yeah, use a Mac. And we've seen it time and time again. Like even Clint over at LGR, Lazy Game Reviews, his main machine now for editing and for his creative work is a Mac. And that's weird because there's not many more PC type dudes than LGR. But yeah, we're just seeing this now that quietly it's kind of taking over in terms of what folks are using. M5 on the horizon. Are we going to see the Mac Pro maybe? Are we going to see desktop only variants that have got that power that do need a little bit more cooling? Will we have the ability to actually add things? Will Apple realize that, hey, absolute high-end power users that are going to pay $20,000 for a machine, they need the ability to be able to swap in cards? And will you get the best of both worlds? Will they realize that, hey, if we want the user to be able to throw an NVIDIA GPU into this machine, maybe we need to create that? And that's where I think the Mac Pro will come in. Will iPad and Mac merge or stay parallel? And I think we both know the answer to that, don't we? Not to say never, because I said, iPad OS will never get multitasking windowing, and it has that now. I said Logic Pro will never come to iPad, and we have that now. So if anything, me saying there'll never be a touchscreen Mac and iPad OS will never run Mac OS, yeah, take that with a shaker of salt, because we've seen it happen in the past. What about new product lines? Yeah, Apple talk a lot about gaming. Is there a gaming Mac? Can you imagine a MacBook Elite that is just for gamers? There's an interesting thought, isn't there? And yeah, those modular systems for higher end stuff. The HomePod, or that new weird screen on an arm that they've been talking about. The Vision Pro. We didn't even touch on the Vision Pro, but during this time we have the R1 chip. And does that mean, is that going to continue? Are we going to see that all sort of converge? Is M5 just going to be everything? And what about iPhones? Are iPhones going to get an M series chip? Now, to date, they haven't been able to, because they're too small. There's not enough space in here to put the M series chip in. But is that always going to be the case? We've got rumors of the iPhone Air coming soon. Is that going to use an M series? Probably not, because it's got even less space. But you get the gist here, right? There's a lot of things over the horizon, and unlike in the past where they made these changes, where we talked about the PowerPC and the Intel change, that was kind of a survival thing. That was to keep the baseline. And I think what Silicon has done is taken the baseline and just thrown it up into the sky. And we've got this trajectory at the moment of what will they do next? And yes, the revolution was 2020, but the evolution between then and now has still been pretty good. To the point where if you're still using an M1, I still dust off my M1 Mac from time to time, it still runs well. Yes, did I make a mistake getting 8 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigabyte hard drive? I absolutely did. Folks, get a terabyte. If you're getting a new Mac, spend a little bit extra, because you can't upgrade it. And yes, you can use external drives, but yeah, a terabyte, 16 gigabytes of RAM. Yeah, friends don't let friends buy base models in 2025. So what do you think? I would love your feedback on this. Are you an Apple Silicon user? Have you wet your beak, dipped your toes in the world of Apple? Are you the exact contrary? Do you think this is all a load of guff and that it's all hype and it's all spin, and it's actually better to stick with what you know and keep in your PC comfort zone? I get it. I stay in a lot of comfort zones. This is one of the few zones that I've decided to take a slightly less comfortable path with. So let me know. I would love to hear your experience, your thoughts, your stories. What's the future look like? Is Intel going to come back in a big bad way? Is AI going to mean that we don't even need this sort of processing because everything's off device and in the cloud? There's so many interesting things. The one thing that you can't say about the world of technology, of computers, of tablets, of phones, is that it's boring. there is plenty going on and plenty to talk about. But yeah, 5 years of Apple Silicon from M1 to M4. I've definitely dived into it and definitely learned a lot along the way. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and your feedback as well. Hey, if you would like to learn how to use those wonderful silicon devices to create music, especially if you're into GarageBand on your iPad or your iPhone or Logic Pro on iPad, check out studiolivetoday.com. We've got more than 3,000 videos in total over the last nearly 10 years outlining everything you need to know about recording and creating and releasing your music, from automation to zip drives or something like that. Thanks everyone for being here. If you would do me a favor, do me a solid and hit the thumbs up button, I would appreciate you forever. And until next time, please be kind to yourself, be kind to others, keep creating. I'll see you next time right here on Studio Live Today.